Hello, this is Lily Ramirez, and for my passion project, I chose to speak about the Night Stalker. This is my criminal investigation podcast. What inspired me to make this podcast was I was watching the Night Stalker documentary, and I felt that I should make this about it. Criminal investigation is something I'm pretty passionate about. I've always wanted to be a detective since I was young, and I plan to take that ROP next year if I can. Many things I could have wrote this podcast about, spoke about it, such as the Zodiac Killer, Ted Bundy, and many more. The question now may be, who is the Night Stalker? Well, his real name is Richard Ramirez, and he was born in El Paso, Texas, and he lived with his family and had one other sibling. He moved to California in 1982. His victims that he targeted and brutally murdered and or assaulted were either in LA County or in Orange County, but he mainly targeted LA County. His victims ranged from all ages, such as kids, very young kids, so they would range from ages like 4 to 6 or 8 or 10, and then he would move on to adults like young couples that were recently married, and he also targeted older people, elders. The two main detectives that worked on this case, names were Frank Solano and Gil Carrera. They worked thoroughly on this case and they would not give up. They had a very hard time at home with their families accepting the fact that they were very passionate, that they wanted to see this case through and catch the Night Stalker. He started his killings in 1984 with a murder of a 79-year-old woman. A victim that really stood out to me was a 6-year-old girl, and she still remembers the gruesome acts that occurred. When he kidnapped her, he took her to his house and assaulted her. And the woman now today speaks about it, and she likes to not let that affect the way she lives now. Throughout the cases and the evidence that was being collected, one thing that tied him to the case was that he left a shoe print, and it often occurred that he would wear the same shoes since he was homeless, and he would always use the same gun. So he would always use a .22, and that was the main thing that could really just point him out in a different group. It took him about 8 to 9 months of the case was pending to catch the Night Stalker. Another thing that tied the Night Stalker to the case was that when he used to rob houses, because when he would rob the houses, he would obviously ransack through the houses and take whatever he can, and something that he took was a diamond bracelet from one of his victims, and he did make a mistake where he gave that bracelet to a friend, and the friend gave it to his girlfriend. So obviously, he did leave some loose ends, which was bad on his part, but good for the detectives because that was very easy for them to connect. That way, he had a friend, and also another. Moving forward, 2 days before that he was caught and put into court, he went into a library, and the librarian that day noticed that he was checking out some interesting choices of books, and the books that he chose was Zodiac books and satanic books. And the reason why he was taking these books all started when he was a young child. He had a very rough and sad childhood. He grew up in a very religious home, and his parents didn't appreciate that he did not believe in God. So he would say all the time, like, I just don't believe, I don't know what to believe. And his father especially did not like to put up with that. Ramirez was assaulted by his father all the time because he didn't believe in the religion that they wanted to practice. His father would also resort to brutal tactics where he tied him to a cross and would leave him in a cemetery overnight, and this happened multiple times. So Ramirez did suffer from a horrible childhood, and he grew up to be homeless, and just many things. He resorted to Satanism. Due to his satanic ways, the detectives believed that he could be linked to Charles Manson because of the satanic writing he would carve into the walls and the pentagrams he left on his victims and also on the walls. He would specifically write them on his victims' hands and his own hands. He had a tattoo of a pentagram on his hand, and as well as some of his friends, and that means that he could have been involved in a cult with his friends of Satanism. By now, the media was very involved, and the news and the mayor released evidence from the detectives that almost put the case at rest, because Ramirez would follow the news often. The evidence that was leaked were the shoes that he left behind. Avia are the brand of shoes that he was wearing and the footprint that they caught. Only one of these shoes were sold in California, and it was his. He also only used a .22 pistol that had a run paint on the bullet castings, which was easy for detectives to pick him out from the others and notice that he uses the same gun often. With the media so involved, Ramirez actually liked the name Night Stalker, and he said that to one of his victims, so the media stuck with it. Since he loved the name so much, he kind of craved the attention that he was receiving from the media. He was caught in '85 running from the police, and he was running through LA County, and he was trying to hijack cars that he could steal, and he came across a few individuals who would fight back, and he was eventually caught after he came across one individual, and he fought with him, and he ended up losing that fight, and the police were able to catch up with him, and they caught him. Once all the police cars were there and he was caught, there was people running around everywhere screaming with joy that he was finally caught after this long, and he was a horrible killer, and people were just filled with joy that he was finally gone and they could feel safe again. This trial was pending for 3 years, and when he was caught in 1985, it went through all the way to 1989. Once he was put into court and now he was in questioning, the victims described him as a very evil-looking man, and they said that he had decaying teeth that stood out from most when they were looking at other suspects, and they could tell that he was just evil and could sense it in his eyes. And he was a very tall, scrawny looking man. He was Hispanic. He grew up in a Hispanic household. And another thing that really helped detectives is that during one of his attacks in Mission Viejo, a young boy who was working on his bike at night saw Ramirez's car and actually remembered the first 4 digits of it, which helped the detectives get a lead in the long run. Once and for all, he was finally put into jail and was charged on the count of 43 assaults and 14 murders. The people who were in court and testifying against him, they had a difficult time even speaking about their experience. Many were uncomfortable and had to leave because of the gruesome things that he would do. Overall, this case is very interesting and gruesome. The things that he did were very horrible, and it's good that he was finally caught. He was a very twisted man in the head, which some could blame it on his childhood. He did have a horrible childhood, but like a lot of other serial killers, that often seems to be the case. Thank you for listening to my criminal investigation podcast. This is the end. Thank you for listening, and have a good rest of your day.